Well, today marks the 20th anniversary that ex-Panama dictator Manuel Noriega was sentenced for drug trafficking in Miami. On the payroll of the CIA and graduate of the School of Americas, Noriega has become notorious for representing one of the most serious foreign policy failures for the United States. And as the U.S.'s war on drugs drags on into its fourth decade, it looks like little has actually been achieved in the crackdown. Violence rages on in Latin America. The demand for drugs still remains. And while brutal drug cartels stay in power, U.S. prisons are filling up with nonviolent drug offenders. So what will it take for the U.S. to change its failed foreign policy in Latin America and rethink the war on drugs? To discuss this, Nico Udu-Gama, field organizer for the School of America's Watch, joins us now. Welcome, Nico. So it's been 20 years since Noriega's sentencing. You know, he's become this failure, this symbol of failure of U.S. foreign policy. He worked with the CIA. He was educated here in the U.S., in Georgia. So let's talk more about the School of Americas and where it stands today.
Right. Well, as you said, Manuel Noriega was trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas, which is a military training institution for Latin American officials and soldiers. It was actually set up in 1946 in Panama, and it later was moved in 1980 to Fort Benning, Georgia. Manuel Noriega was trained at the School of the Americas in the 1950s and 60s, and he was even considered one of a student with honors. He was called our man in Panama. Manuel Noriega was on the CIA payroll, as you said, from 1966 until his ouster by the U.S. Invasion in 1989. And little has changed since then. The U.S. Army School of the Americas has consistently graduated the worst human rights violators and at least 11 dictators in Latin America. And what we, as the School of the Americas Watch, are saying is, what is the purpose behind the training of these human rights violators who keep popping up from Argentina? General Videla was just sentenced for kidnapping babies. You know, in Colombia, every drug trafficker, a lot of the major generals were just recently cited as being in the payroll of the Norte del Valle drug cartel. You know, in Mexico, we're seeing the same thing as well. The U.S. continues to prop up these human rights violators, and the violence continues.
And as you just had mentioned, the school graduates a lot of these people that end up being dictators and human rights violators. What is it about the School of Americas that kind of pumps out these graduates that end up committing these crimes later on?
Right. Well, in 1996, the Pentagon was forced to reveal that the School of the Americas was actually teaching torture. And after that, the grassroots pressure continued to show that graduates were still being trained, and in 2001 they changed the name of the school to the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. However, we understand that many of these graduates continue to go back. They are the people who are doing the defending of corporations' work in Latin America at the behest of the United States. There's a Colonel Inistrosa, who was an SOA graduate from Honduras, who after the coup in that country in 2009, which ousted the democratically elected government of Manuel Zelaya, told the Miami Herald that because of their training in the United States, it would be impossible for them to work with leftist governments. So this is a clear indication of the training that they're receiving, the culture of militarization that is being imparted to these students.
And to your knowledge, that culture still exists today?
That's right, yes, it still exists. Right now, the Colombian government is investigating some of the top generals, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is equal to Martin Dempsey, General Martin Dempsey in this country, for receiving payments of up to $100,000 a month from the captured head of the Norte del Valle drug cartel. In Mexico right now, in Ciudad Juarez, the police chief, Julian Leizaula Perez, is a graduate of the School of the Americas and has been seriously implicated in human rights abuses. And there are indications. In 2003, the Brownsville Herald in Texas reported that the Mexican Secretary of Defense revealed that the original members, at least 1/3 of the original members of the Zetas drug cartel, received U.S. training, were Mexican special forces who later turned over to the drug cartels.
So it's quite possible that this school is training the dictators of tomorrow.
That's exactly right. And the Pentagon refuses to release the names of the graduates since 2004. So we continue to press the government to release those names of the instructors and graduates and to continue to take our protest to the school.
It seems shocking to me that there wouldn't be some, I mean, in the wake of, Noriega and 11 other dictators that did attend this school, that there aren't more safeguards to prevent this from happening, whatever that may be.
Unfortunately, that's right. The School of the Americas, once they changed their name to the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, established a rubber stamp board, oversight board, which does little to actually track the graduates. And most of the information that we have received is from our social movements allies in Latin America. And many of those social movements who have tracked the graduates in their countries have now asked their presidents to pull out of the School of the Americas. Ecuador recently just pulled out of the School of the Americas just 2 weeks ago, becoming the 5th country in Latin America to do so.
So now what does that mean exactly? Does that mean people from Ecuador can no longer attend?
That's right. As of June 29th of this year, President Correa said that no more police or military will be attending the School of the Americas.
Now, this is kind of an opportunity to talk about the bigger picture of what exactly is going on in Latin America. This war on drugs, we've been fighting it for 4 decades now, but are there any real signs that it's working?
Well, the way to see U.S. intervention in Latin America is that it's been the same objective with different facades. In the 1950s and 60s up to the 90s, it was the war on communism. Then it became the war on terrorism and the war on narco-terrorism. We're seeing that the same people are being affected, the same people are dying, and the same people are getting wealthy. So while we're talking about drug cartels in Latin America, the same people are running money through the U.S. banks. The same people are getting wealthy off of this drug war. And not much is changing, as you talked about. Also in this country, more and more people are being sent up for nonviolent drug offenses. So it's a issue that the United States refuses to address, but more and more Latin American leaders are actually trying to take a step back and say, listen, this drug war is not working.
It's obviously the approach isn't working. I mean, at what point, what will it take for the U.S. to change its policy there? I mean, it's been 4 decades now before they change their policy there and change the approach to the war on drugs.
I think it's going to take a very strong grassroots movement, both in Latin America and in this country, to actually stand up and say, listen, these policies are not working. We cannot keep spending billions of dollars each year on training militaries. We need to actually look at the causes of drug addiction, to look at the causes of poverty, and that's when we'll start seeing some changes. Right now, the United States refuses to look at that and continues to pump money into a cycle of contracting, military contracts, and money for war.
And, another argument that's made is that, the reason why this war on drugs isn't going anywhere is because the demand has been consistent. And as long as that there is a demand, there's going to be a supply. So, I mean, since that being the reality, how can we change the policy to affect or to reflect that reality?
Well, I think right now there are a lot of people working on the issue of decriminalization of drugs in this country. Right now, many of the presidents in Latin America have made that stand, saying that we must decriminalize this war, decriminalize the drugs. What we need to do in this country is continue to ask for the closure of military training institutions like the School of the Americas, continue to ask that the Pentagon stop spending millions of dollars on these wars. And that's where I think we will succeed.
But it doesn't look like President Obama is receptive to decriminalization at this point.
He's under a lot of pressure. And we understand that power concedes nothing without a demand. So we must continue to keep pressing President Obama or whoever enters the White House. We understand that either Democrat or Republican, the actual what has happened in Latin America hasn't changed much. Despite the Democrat or Republican administrations over the years. So the wars continue under different names.
And lastly, I just want to ask you, I know that your organization is really advocating for the closure of the School of Americas. How far are you in that fight, and do you think it's realistic that that can actually be achieved anytime soon?
Well, it's been a long fight. It's been over 20 years since the first protest at the School of the Americas started. We continue to fight. We understand that this is going to be, we're going to keep pressing Congress to pass legislation, and the signs from Latin America are very heartening that governments are pulling out of the School of America. So we're 5 down, and we're going to keep going until we close down that school.
So it looks like other countries are recognizing that something needs to change.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Nico, thank you so much for coming on the show and weighing in. That was Nico Udu-Gama. He's the field organizer for the School of America's Watch.